In this lesson, we're going to take a look at the very basics of the UV mapping inside of Maya. We're going to look at how we can tweak and adjust the UVs to adjust the textures that are applied to them. So we have textures, 2D images, applied to these objects. If we were to flatten out these objects, that would create a UV for us. So we're going to take a look at exactly what does that look like. I'm going to go up in my Polygon tab and over to my UV texture editor right here at the end. And when I select on it, I'm not going to see anything inside the view unless I select on an object. So I'm going to select on some objects, and you can see how they have UVs applied to them. Now the UVs are right in here, these little white lines that you see. These are each one of the polys, each one of the sides of this object. They're flattened out, and where it's flattened out is what it's actually showing you on the image. So as I can see it in here, if I go into it and say, well, let's go to my, let's say a UV mode. I can go into the UV mode. I can actually select on the UVs, and when I select on those UVs, let's select a couple right in here. We can see we've got these 2 points selected. We can also select from here if we wanted to. If I select on those points, I have my move tool selected. If you have just your selection tool, make sure you've got your move tool on. And then you can actually adjust those points, and as you adjust them, you see how it's going to adjust what's being seen on that UV from that texture. So this is a great way for going in, tweaking the UV points to make sure that they line up the way you want with your textured image. And that is the basics of adjusting some of the UV points. Now there are other options in here as well. We have our edge and our vertex and our face. What we can do is actually select on, for instance, our face mode. And I'm just going to left click and drag. I'm selecting on this poly right here. Now when I select on this poly, I can go up to my polygon options, and then I can adjust how this polygon is going to be connected to the rest of it. So for instance, if I want to detach that poly from it, I can go in and do a split UVs if we wanted to, for instance. So if I do split UVs, that's going to break it apart so that now I have an object that is separate. If we were to move to our object, we can see that it's that bottom plane right there. Let's say we select even another plane here. We've got one right here in the back. We can go back into our face mode, select on the poly, go into our polygons, go into our split UVs, and that's going to break it apart. You notice it also puts us in a UV mode, because UV mode is the only way we can move UVs in this space. But now I have control of that poly and what it's going to be rendering. I can also adjust the scale of that poly, or of that UV poly there, those UV coordinates, and then we can also rotate those UV points. So you've got a lot of control on the UV coordinates and how you're going to visualize those textures onto your object. Okay, now the only other thing that we want to look at is how do we get outside of this mode. If we go back in here in the object, we can see that we're still in a UV mode. If we right click inside of the viewport on top of our object, we right click on top of our object, and then we can go over to our object mode. Our object mode is going to put us back into just our object so that we can adjust it the way we need to. Alright, so that gives us a brief look at how we can go to an object, get to our editor, and then through our UV texture editor actually adjust the points, the UV points on our object, rotate them, move them, scale them around, and then even break them apart so that we can get just what we want. Now this is a basic understanding of the UV mapping. We'll be looking at this in much more depth in future videos. Alright, so take a moment, have some fun, and try it out.